reduce the right violations that we see. It will actually reduce infractions. It will reduce violations of human rights. It will reduce and speed up trial. Then you are not putting money to allow it to function. Then I think it is actually a case of robbing Peter to actually pay Paul. And that is something that we believe requires some level of media interrogation to know why this is the case. At the national level, we saw very clearly that the 2024 budget provided only a paltry sum of 73 million for the implementation of ACJL. And we think that is not very correct, where you are putting over $1 billion for the renovation of offices. So one of the things we have also discovered very clearly is that state level and across board, people rather put money into capital projects that they know has some element of backdoor shuttle diplomacy in terms of what they get out of it, rather than putting it in programs that reforms the entire system, and this in itself calls for a serious concern. And we believe it is very important that we raise some of these observations for state. As a matter of fact, in some states we notice very clearly that the setting up of the Administration of Criminal Justice Monitoring Committee that should actually monitor compliance of all the criminal justice actors within the value chain are entirely missing. Some states don't even have them set up. For states where you have them set up, they have not been inaugurated. For some states where you have them inaugurated, some of them don't even know where their offices are. And some of them don't even know what their roles should look like. And we think this is a very big issue that we should put some element of spotlight around in terms of the adequacy of funding for purposes of promoting judicial activism. And because the judicial activism is one of the elements that will have and allow for a very vast society to function in a robust manner, political elites, and particularly those from the executive, are not offering that sort of support and independence. And we notice very clearly across states that even the parliament and state houses of assembly that also has the responsibility to appropriate and also oversight are not in any way putting their own energy in those areas just to be able to ensure that they continue to control and manage the entire activities within that particular realm. And no wonder we always see the case of where political elites would always put some individuals on the spot because they want to abuse the law, knowing fully well that all the infrastructure are not functional, and that in itself offer them an opportunity to begin to do what is wrong. So for 2025, we think the media should actually spotlight on the context of the budget and the content therein, to be able to interrogate and begin to ask questions. Why are we not putting some element of infrastructure and mobility into the movement of the vehicle of operationalizing of this particular law? And then, of course, the process in itself. And we notice very clearly that the entire value chain and the processes within this law, as stated in that particular act and the law, are not being complied with, both from the bedrock of the criminal justice actors, which is particularly the police, the court in itself, and of course even the custodial facilities. And we notice that there are disparities in terms of coordination among them, even the knowledge of it. As a matter of fact, most of the states we went will realize that over 70% of criminal justice actors and stakeholders have never cited the law in the first place. And we believe very clearly that this is an area where the media also has some level of responsibility, ensuring that we advance not just the content, but of course that this particular law in itself does exist. And if it existed, what exactly should they be doing with it? And a number of them don't even know why. And that is a reason why we realize that the conduct of most of the law enforcement agents has not shifted and has not changed, despite the existence of all of these laws. We realize that, look, the law stipulates very clearly a procedure that you must actually put in place before you arrest. It has a procedure for detention. It has procedure for interrogation. It has procedures for investigation. And all of these infrastructures and procedures are not thoroughly complied with. And the question is why? It is because, one, these guys are not even aware of the existence of this law. Two, they have not even read it in the first place. Most of the commands where we have visited, we have had to donate soft copies to most of the state infrastructure and state agencies for a particular law that they designed in that particular state. So we have had to donate to them. And some states, the laws in itself had actually, it requires some level of evaluation and review, and nobody is actually doing anything about it. So there are also the issue that around the performance of the law, which is something that we need to deal with. The law also requires some KPIs on the monitoring and evaluation, which the ACJMC has a responsibility to monitor and report and request for constant review, but because they were not there, it is becoming very difficult for us to see those operationalization take place. So what we now see in most cases is that the deficit in the implementation and the functionality of this law has actually put justice up for sale. And this in itself is one very key gap that we have actually seen. Ministry of Justice in most of the states are not responding to appropriation. Sometimes it is also a case of their knowledge around the call circular when they request for circulars. Sometimes it is an issue of priority, what their priorities are at that particular level. And we'll notice very clearly that if you don't appropriate, obviously there is no way you can design programming around it. ACJMC in most states, like I mentioned, are not existing. In areas where they exist, they are inactive, and of course, they are poorly resourced. And we think it is very key. Plea bargaining, as contained in the ACJL, has now become a weapon for negotiation. And then, of course, it actually therefore creates and put a price tag on justice. And that is one of the key interrogations that the media should begin to ask. What and how has plea bargaining in itself actually added value to our own criminal justice system? And we notice very clearly that the politically exposed persons exploit this particular provision in the law for them to procure justice. And we think it is something that we need to put up. And we realize very clearly that there is also accountability deficit within that particular sector. And of course, poor priorities in budgeting is one key element that also requires some element of additional preview. Welfare of justice and justice actors, and particularly those who work in that sector, is tied to the political body language. So it therefore means that one of the reasons why the entire independence of the judiciary has become very difficult is because people therefore have some level of weapon, which is actually funding. So they regulate funding into that sector just to be able to limit the level of independence for control to continue to advance. And we think it is important for us to put that on the table. There are also deficits in infrastructure for efficient dispensation of justice. The law provides very clearly that witness protection is very key, that even at the point of arrest, that when you interrogate a particular suspect, that suspect should be interrogated with some element of convenience. One is that you must have an interrogation room that is conducive, where you have digital equipment that will help the person to be able to function properly. And then, of course, eliminate this growing concern that suspect will actually plead as an alibi in court to say that they actually gave those statements under duress. So the law says, look, let there be some kind of recording devices across this value chain. But we can only report that only one state, in Katsina, has that particular interrogation room that is modernized, that is well equipped. And that is actually at the force headquarters, actually. And perhaps it is in their plan to extend it to various divisions, but we only see it at the police headquarters. But no other state has actually been able to put in those kind of investments for that particular sector. So weak infrastructure around the digital interrogation, even witness. One of the reasons why witness also sometimes deliberately either refuse or fail to show up in court is because their protections are not guaranteed. So the law actually recognizes this and says, look, people can actually give their own witnesses, whether as principal witness or from the remote areas, just to reduce vulnerability on their side. But most of the courts are not actually towing in that area, and they are not investing in it. In fact, it says look for even purposes of a speedy trial that you should digitalize court processes. But again, we are not seeing that happening. People are still going manual, and that is why it is easier for case files to actually go missing. It is easier for people to say case files are not transferred. It is easier. So there are a lot of bureaucracy across the justice value chain, and we believe this is actually one big deficit and setback that the sector is suffering from. But again, the entire conversation around this because it is not properly resourced. And for cases where political interest is actually vested, we notice very clearly that they actually introduced technology. In Kano, for instance, when they were going to announce the tribunal was going to make judgment, they actually do it digitally, but because of the high-profile nature of that particular case, they actually took that option. So it said very clearly that it is now becoming a gradual norm within the society that justice is actually served only to the rich. So those who are actually regular citizens like you and I actually have to struggle for us to be able to get justice, and this is a major issue. So what are the issues? The issue basically is that this generally creates a delay in the dispensation of justice. And we believe that there is a need for us to quickly begin to reverse this trend and, of course, find a way to deal with it very clearly. Custodial centers have become crime scene. Most crimes and most organized crime, as a matter of fact. Okay, now, most serious and organized crime are actually most times organized from custodial facilities. And there are quite a number of evidence that also has alluded to this. But the question is, how has the state translated those evidence into queries for those who lead these agencies to also begin to respond to them, and therefore we can now say, okay, these are the progress we have made. A number of us are very much involved, particularly have reported all the recent saga with the procurement of bed space and cells. And we realize very clearly that at the end of the day, that issue naturally died without any form of advancement. The National Assembly set up an investigation around it, and we didn't see any form of advancement around it. So it therefore tells you very clearly that some backdoor channels and shuttle diplomacy had come in. The question the media should be asking is just to be able to get a report. What is the final report from that incident? I recall that a particular committee led by an NGO actually submitted a report, but again, they made some observations that they believe were not substantive enough, but we didn't have the energy to follow up. So we now have record of increased cases of suspects who are also escaping from police facilities in some of the states. The question is it an issue of infrastructure? Is it an issue of connivance? Is it an issue of the fact that our infrastructures are not secured enough and the idea here is when criminals or suspects leave facilities when their time is not, that it actually creates additional risk on the larger society, and this is something we need to deal with. Investigation and prosecution are also poorly executed, and in most cases we realize that investigators and prosecutors don't even have adequate interaction, and this in itself puts the state in a very difficult situation to win cases. There's a particular state we went, and one of the defense counsel apparently mentioned very clearly that in that particular case, the state was actually meant to win the case because it was a case that bordered around GBV. The evidence was very substantial, but because the state does not have the capacity to hire experienced lawyers, so they only have very young, inexperienced people who they now make prosecutors, and these people go to court to defend cases against very experienced people in the defense line, and that was how the state lost. And we realized very clearly that on the serial cases, the state has consistently lost cases, even where it became very evident that they should have won, but they have lost. But because the state has failed or deliberately refused to invest in the cases of hiring experienced hands in all of this value chain. And that for us is something that we think require a little bit of an additional effort. And in most cases, we don't even have forensic experts anymore that will be able to help determine and of course help the adjudication of a particular case. And those forensic experts, a number of them are just in the private practice and requires a lot of money. And this also has continued to create a little bit of an issue. And of course, even profilers within the criminal justice actors are also completely gone. I think the last profiler that the Nigerian police force has retired recently. So why is this the case? When we don't have, so we cannot even prove anything when it comes to, so it therefore now means that the entire system is actually very vulnerable, and we need to put additional effort into it. And the mental health of most of those within the sector is also a little bit of an issue because of the kind of things they encounter periodically. And we think resourcing and putting funds in that particular sector is actually something that is very urgent. Poor monitoring platforms exist. Weak accountability is something that we think also is an issue that requires media interrogation. Institutions. So what exactly are the institutions that are saddled with the responsibility for response? Ministry of Justice at state and national levels have not demonstrated deliberate willpower to reform that particular sector. And that in itself is clearly bastardized. And then, of course, it has become a weapon in the hands of law enforcement agents, particularly to exploit those who are in search for justice, or those who are considered to be victims, or particularly those who are perpetrators. But most importantly, that politically exposed persons have now seen it as an exit door to be able to escape justice. And that for us is actually the most fundamental element. Because once a crime is committed, it is behoves on the state to actually ensure that justice is served. But what we have seen very clearly happening is that at the point of investigation, they quickly introduce plea bargaining as alternative to that person going through the justice route. And then once you take that route, they find a way so literally it is like procuring justice. So once that happens, it offers that person some level of safeguard. And that safeguard means that you no longer get to be entirely processed through the courts. So we think it is actually not being implemented in the actual sense as the law has stipulated it. No matter what the plea bargaining arrangements are, it is actually meant to be an arrangement that offers a speedier processes for justice to be served. But they cut off the aspect that borders around punishment, and they take away the areas that is very juicy. And at the end of the day, they make it a win-win for both the perpetrator and then, of course, the state. And I think that is actually a consequence for the poor nature of conceiving the law and how we have also implemented it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I meant the law without having seen the law.
Yeah.
So if they have not seen it, meaning they have not read it.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of work for the media to focus on, and when you talk about the law enforcement agent, their own is even better when you compare with the citizenry. So there is this challenge I want to bring, because I want to summarize certain things that we may have to take away. For the media to try as much as possible to continue to work on citizen knowledge building. And that citizen knowledge building includes also the security agencies and all the other people that are implementing. We will say that we've been doing it fine, but what we discover in our work is that we do capacity building for all these agencies, but you build the capacity of a set of people, and in the next 2-3 years, they are retired. So what do? Will you rely that you built it last year and not build this year? So that's what I'm saying. So we continue to do this so that the awareness and to know about the intricacies and the tenets of this law is more or less increased within the citizens, which includes the security agencies, so that when people get there, they are able to engage with knowledge so that we can have effective implementation of this. She was talking about whether this survey is zeros on budget. The issue of budgeting in Nigeria is that people put money where they think there's something for them.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to issues that we really, really affect the society and bring about a social change, people, the duty bearers don't put a lot of money in it. Instead, they want to put money in building, construction, roads. So if you find all the government, what do they showcase on the TV? Construction, bridge commissioning, laying foundation, and so you have the monuments, but the people life are not secured.
Yeah.
The people's life don't have any social change, and then there's also this public that people now react and begin to take law into their hand, like what we've seen happen in Uromi and all the rest of them. It's out of frustration that those things happen. And sometimes you wonder whether we'll get it right. But I think that I still believe that the media has a lot to do. Even in fighting government, the media should be in the forefront. Last, was it a few weeks ago with the president of the media in the situation room to talk about partnership with the civil society in terms of bringing about the issues of governance, not just one aspect of the work we are doing, but governance generally. And I think the MBA and then the media, what's the name? The media umbrella, general. NUJ, thank you, NUJ, it's escaping me. The president was there and we were discussing together to really work together to bring about issues of good governance and challenging the government, and I'm happy that that partnership is growing with the civil society. So at the level of the state, let it also be a growing phenomenon that we are always meeting. Like I said, let it not just be one project intervention, but a continuous thing that we need to do. The other thing I want to say is that it's important that we begin to also advocate that the government should walk the talk. Because when some of them also talk, they seem to say, we desire a society that is written, but when it comes to walking the talk, it's not there. And walking the talk brings you put your money where your mouth is now? Yes. But again, I think that the media should be highlighting such things and make it a continuous. We may not achieve it in one day, but as we continue to do it, I think impact will be made and so on. There are so many things that have been highlighted in this thing, and I think when you look at the presentation, you'll be able to pick out a thing. But let it be that actions are articulated, and then let's build also a mass involvement that brings in a lot of impact and growth. And like you said, somebody asked, why are we not doing in the Southeast? Why are we not in the region? We have limitations. Sometimes when you do research, you have scope limitation. When you also do budget, you have budget limitations and so on. But that's not to say that we have taken out any of the sub-regions. But again, because everything is politicized in Nigeria, we want to say that Cleen Foundation, we are not into politics and we will not it's just that we intervene from state to state depending on the fund that's available to us. So again, I want to say that. Thank you so much. Because while I was taking, I took it down here and I studied. Everywhere I have spoken on this issue of plea bargain, I think is very, very unfair. And I think it's one of the weaknesses of I see in this law. Because a situation where somebody owes has stolen 50 billion, and then you say you are doing plea bargain, let him pay a certain amount and so on. and then after that he has settled the matter.
No
I think it's very unfair. And I think that what I noted here for Action for the Media is to continue to publicize and continue to write on the unfairness of that section of the law until it is amended and changed. I know that a law cannot be cast on stone. We need to continue to improve on it. But that aspect has not yielded any so much benefit to anybody. Because when people do this kind of plea bargain, like he said, politically exposed people most of the time exploit it. Because they still have the money. Sometimes the money, the whole of the money they stole is still in their coffers. And they bring out just a part of it and say we have settled it. And then what that money will have done and the life that are affected negatively and almost taken out of life is not repudiated. Nothing is I think it's one of the unfair aspects of that, particularly the way it is implemented in Nigeria. So for media, my advice is that continue to write on it. You know, the way maybe the media houses can take up, because I tend to bring out actions that you can take after this meeting. You know, like the Chibok girls kidnapped. You see, just a small place in I don't know whether they still do it. 300 days, 3 years after this thing, and this thing. Those things make impact. So if you have a section on the front of your newspaper or anything that you always say, ACJ, unfairness or plea bargain, unfairness or plea bargain, and let it run for years. I think that aspect needs to be looked into. That's my own personal opinion, and I stand to be corrected, but I feel very bad when I hear those things over the media, and then immediately that is done, case is settled. And look, one of the things that happen, even when they say pay maybe 10 million, you know that there has been other money that has gone underground before that 10 million which is expressed. And these are, again, oiling the wheel of corruption. So I think the issue of plea bargain is very unfair.
Absolutely.
That's my take on this. And I appeal to media to please hammer this and hammer it very well. Thank you so much.